Hello and welcome everyone. This is Experiencia Infinita. My name is Manuel and I thank you very much for joining me in this adventure where we're going to go looking for consciousness and try to solve the three big questions: where we come from, who we are, and where we're going. We're going to dive deep into science, energy, near death experience, consciousness, spirit realms. Wherever this road leads us, that's where we're going to go. In this first episode, I have the pleasure to talk with David Bettenhausen and Carla Bognikied, who through meditation connected with beings of the spirit realm who showed them their previous lives and how they are all intertwined. It's an extremely fascinating conversation we had. This time we're going to talk about their book, The Gift of Past Lives. We're going to talk about reincarnation, past lives, meditation, messages from the other side. In the description below, you're going to be able to find a link to their website and where to buy their books. Our Facebook page, our email address where you can send all your questions and comments or suggestions, and our Patreon link where you can support this project. Thank you and see you at the end of the episode. Hello, how you doing, guys? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you great.
David Bettenhausen and Carla Bognikied, thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you. Excellent book, The Gift of Past Lives, with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. We'll figure out who those characters are. All right, and before we start, I want to recognize Carla to have the courage to share this present life in this book. It's amazing. I started reading the book. I expected to see rainbows and unicorns, but then I started reading your life and I was like, oh my God. So it kind of brought it down to like a normal, everyday person life. So thank you very much for having the courage to share that with all the people.
Thank you for reading it.
Okay, so one question, Dave, why you?
That's a good question. We sort of believe that it's because I was going through some rough times at that time when we started to meditate. And I didn't realize that Carla was really praying for me and I was praying for Carla at the same time. I've always had some sort of a feeling that God listened. However, this experience changed everything for us. We started having lots of different experiences. It all started really 6 years ago. We had just started electronic medical records in the office, and it was very strange. I'm a physician. Carla worked in my office as my office manager. We'd known each other for 16 years and been best friends. And the day she came up to me and said, I can't reach you, I can't talk to you, you're becoming grouchy and tired, and said, we've got to try something to snap you out of it. Carla had been reading that morning, hadn't you, Carla?
Yeah, an unlikely publication, AARP, had an article about meditation and the benefits. And, I'm rather open. I always have been. I had tried to meditate years ago, but, I was raised in a religion that said if you meditated, you would conjure up terrible, evil things. So I stopped doing it. But then, I was older, wiser, and I thought, we should try it. If meditation can give us peace of mind, it can turn off the computers and the electronic media. If we can have some peace just to ourselves for once, we should try it. And Dave, normally I would describe him as a cross between Yogi Bear and Barney Rubble. And he just wasn't like that anymore. And you asked why, Dave?
Yes.
It's because Dave is very pure at heart. He truly is. He's the nicest, sweetest man I've ever met. That's very true. You read the book, you know that, not me so much.
I know. Once I get to Dave's story, his life story, I was like, oh my God, that's when the rainbows and the unicorns started coming out.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And he's so funny the way he tells it in the story. He really is funny.
So we started that day, that first day. It was just nice. It was peaceful. Meditation made me relax. It's really very, very interesting because over the first year of meditation, I actually lost 100 pounds because I really got in touch with myself. And meditation actually has a lot of health benefits. So we taught meditation for a while at the local university here. We taught at senior centers and other venues, just trying to share that meditation could make you feel better. But it's really what happened on about the third day of meditation that really started to change our lives. I was meditating that day. Carla had all the girls come into the office the first few days. The third day, they couldn't all come in, and it was just Carla and I. We started to meditate. And while I was meditating, this woman appeared to me. She was happy go lucky. She kept showing me a shoe, and she looked like Carla from a side view because their eyelashes reminded me of each other. And as I'm sort of talking to her, experiencing her, I've come to believe it's Carla's mother. So when you said the book is named Mother Isabella, Guide, and Elizabeth, mother first came to me, and it was Carla's mother showing me a shoe. And right after we got done meditating, I ran in. I said, Carla, I think I was talking to your mother. She kept showing me a shoe. And again, for me, I thought I was maybe losing my mind for just a moment because I was brought up Catholic. And certainly I'm not supposed to talk to anybody who's been dead for 20 years while I'm in the middle of meditating.
And Mother had passed away 20 years before. It wasn't like Dave had a relationship with her. Why she was coming to him and not me, I thought, well, that's odd. But when he said shoe, ding, 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 a light, went off and bells were ringing because my mother was a ballroom dancer.
Uh-huh. I wanted to ask you about that because she came to you, Dave. That makes me think that if she would have contacted you, Carla, we normally would have dismissed that as imagination, especially because you were meditating. So maybe as a memory or as imagination. So do you think that's why she contacted Dave?
Dave has a fantastic gift. He can close his eyes and be in the spiritual realm in a couple of seconds. It takes me 20 minutes to quiet my mind, or before I go to sleep or as I'm waking up. That's when I meditate. I hear things in my left ear, not like Dave does. I feel things, I see them, not like Dave does. So it would have taken my mother years to get through to my thicket. So it was easier to go through Dave, who opened right up and he could hear everything and see her. Dave can smell and hear and feel. He can go right back to those lives like he's living it at this moment. I get bits and pieces. I get pictures, visions, but not like Dave. So I'm sure that's why they went to Dave.
Okay. So do you think if she would have contacted you, you probably would have dismissed that as, oh, I'm just, having a memory or.
No, because I was very open-minded. I believed that we could be reached. I had things happen over my lifetime. Just one really quick story, and then I'll let Dave continue. When I was 4 years old, I was laying in my room. My parents were separated, and my two sisters were laying in bed. We were all sleeping. It was late at night, and I was 4 years old. And yes, I was still in a crib because we didn't have the money to buy me a bed. But having a broken childhood, you grow up with lots of issues and phobias, and I never wanted to go to the bathroom by myself. I always wanted someone to go with me, and I laid in my bed and I kept calling Jessica, Paula, one of my sisters, to get up. And neither one of them did. And I kept calling. And finally, on the left side, I thought it was coming from our closet door. I heard a woman say, Carla, go to sleep. Now, I looked all over the place. I was scared to death. My mother didn't live there anymore. My parents had already separated. My two oldest sisters' room was down the hall, so I knew it wasn't them. And my other two sisters were asleep. But, we have since confirmed that that was my spirit guide, Elizabeth, talking to me. They're always with us, speaking in your left ear. And, there's the fourth part in the book, Mother, Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth is my guide.
Yeah, we're going to go back to guides because I have plenty of questions about them.
Talking about this experience. So we kept meditating because Carla and Paula, who's her sister, both worked in my office, and they were both thrilled to death that their mother, who had passed away, was trying to reach us and talk to us. So they wanted to know something every day. And every day I kept getting new and different bits of pieces of things. I would either see a Mayan temple, I saw hieroglyphics, I saw these stuffed squirrels in one vision, I saw a Civil War scene once, and I didn't quite understand them until Isabella, my spirit guide, sort of introduced herself to me. And she said that she had been with me for 6,000 years since my first life. Now, it's interesting because she sort of reminds me of Carla. Carla's got an edge. She's sort of shakes me when I need to pay attention. And Isabella's a little bit like that too. She's got a warm sense of humor, but she's also can be very direct. So when she started introducing herself to me and started to explain her parts of past lives, I was like, past lives? I haven't got over the fact that I'm Catholic and that people from the spiritual world are talking to me, let alone that there's past lives, reincarnation exists. But I kept going with it because every day was a new experience, and we started taking notes on everything that we experienced. We started seeing colors, and we finally found out that they were angel colors. We started seeing all these scenes that were happening. And then one day I had this memory where I was suddenly standing in an alley. And I looked across this dark alley, and Carla is standing there. Now I say Carla because I knew it was Carla, but she was blonde, young. She still had steel blue eyes, but she was dressed like a flapper with the 1920s garb on. And suddenly there were two loud explosions, and lights flashed, and I felt myself get hit in the chest, and I was thrown back on the ground. And I explained all this to Carla, and then we got more information, and I had found out that I had met Carla in a life in the 1920s, that I had met her at a wedding of a man named Angelo, that Angelo was a gangster of some kind in the 1920s, that we met at a speakeasy, first met at his wedding, then we met at a speakeasy. I got shot at that speakeasy. We found out because I took Ruby on a long walk down by the river in Chicago that her name was Ruby Donaldson, that her father's name was James, that she was from Bullock, Georgia, that she was a flapper to speakeasy, what her name was. And I came back and I told Carla all the information that I was learning. And Carla, being like she is, she took the information and went running.
And I just wanted some proof.
Right.
And, we all want proof, and you want to know you're not crazy. But didn't I find on Ancestry.com a Ruby Donaldson born in 1904, born to James and Anna Donaldson, one of 11 children. And I couldn't find pictures of her, but I did find pictures of her father and her mother. And then I found newspaper articles. One was about Angelo Genna, a gangster in the 1920s. He was in charge of the mob right before Al Capone, and he ran Little Italy. And he got married to a woman named Lucille Spinola, and that was on January the 10th, 1925, and that's where JJ and Ruby met. Dave was JJ. Then I found another article that was a picture of their wedding cake. It was over 10 feet tall, and there were two women standing next to the cake in the article. It served over 3,000 people. So I called Dave and I said, guess what? I found this and this and this and this. And, it's hard to find things to confirm on past lives when it goes way back. But if you can find something close, we have a life, our very last life, where we were brother and sister. And I was 6 and Dave was 4. And we fell to our deaths at ages 6 and 4 from a 3-story staircase in our home. And we know that they are buried in Chicago. But Isabella will not give us the last name because she said we are not to interfere with the family members' paths. Now, if they find our books on their own, that's good, but we're not to interfere. We have to let it take its natural course, not to interfere with their path or their journey.
And why is that?
Because it's all about choice. And we do not want to, the same reason that Isabella and Elizabeth have told us that we are not to go, if you go to a psychic or a medium to find out what you've done in your past life, that's one thing. But to find out about your future life can alter what you do, can alter your choices. And also the reason we talk to our spirit guides and not passed over souls is that they carry a negative karma with them, and they have a tendency to tell you things that aren't necessarily true because they retain the same personalities up there while they're waiting to reincarnate. Some of them play tricks on you. Some of them, just call your name. And unfortunately, a lot of people are raised in fear with religion, and they believe this to be ghosts talking to them. They have fear because that's the way we were all raised.
Right. So when it comes to future, we are not supposed to know what comes, but it is possible, right? There's been people who have predicted or prophetized what's going to happen.
Yes. Correct. But often when that happens, like Nostradamus, Nostradamus did a lot of predicting, and in his future lives, he had to live through some of the predictions that he made because he shouldn't have predicted those things. God doesn't do those things just for the heck of it. God does those things for a reason with a purpose, maybe to get rid of plague or bugs or that sort of thing, not just for the heck of it. So people react differently when they know ahead of time, and everything's about choice. And if you have a reading today, you can change your mind tomorrow, and that doesn't mean that reading is accurate. So why get it?
Okay. So we are not supposed to access the future, but we still have ways to do it. When it comes to the past, why is that we don't carry or we don't have access or easy access to all the information about our previous lives? Do you think it will be an overwhelming amount of information that wouldn't let us work or live?
Absolutely, Manuel. The problem is, I don't always remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. If you try to remember what we discovered, because I found 42 lives for me and 34 for Carla. We've had 29 lives together. But if you try to learn all those details, it's not possible. Your brain becomes overwhelmed and can't differentiate between which is a memory, which is not a memory, and you start getting confused. So we have some protection there, that veil that's there. I'm going to explain something else that's kind of an interesting science truth. We store things in our subconscious now. We know that meditation, and we'll talk a little bit about past life regression later, both of those tap into your subconscious mind. In our subconscious mind, we share all of our experiences. So if you touch something that's hot, like the radiator, and it burns you, you don't try to touch the radiator again. It records that as a negative experience. Same thing works in past lives. It records that negative or positive experience in your subconscious So if you reach for something that's going to burn you, you reach back faster. If you experience something that was very negative to you in a past life, you're going to try to avoid it again so that you don't develop more
Hopefully.
karma. So it's literally your subconscious is recording all these positive and negative experiences. I almost forgot something that's kind of important to our story. Back when I was 3 years old, my father went to graduate school in Boston. Now, I grew up in Nebraska, so that's quite a ways across the country from Boston. And we traveled all the way to Boston, and that summer, we went to a beach, which was the first time I ever saw an ocean. And I was running and screaming on the beach. And as I was screaming on the beach, this little girl jumped up, ran over, pushed me down, and sat on my chest. And she gave me a kiss on the forehead. Then she jumped up, said, "Quit bothering my family." She put both of her hands on her hips, and she had on this little blue two-piece bathing suit with little ruffles and a little pot belly hanging there. And I heard in the background, "Carla, that's not how little ladies act." Now, why that's important is Carla will explain it.
Well, Dave remembered that while he was meditating. He remembered that portion in this life. I didn't need to meditate to remember that. That was stuck in my mind, etched forever, because that particular day, we were raised good Catholic family. My parents they were trying not to get divorced. They separated, got back together, separated. In this particular moment in time, they were together. I was 4 years old. They took that we didn't have a car. We were not well off. They took all 5 of us in 2 cabs to Revere Beach. And the day that Dave started to explain about this beach that he remembered, my sister and I immediately knew that it was Revere Beach because Revere Beach had an amusement park, and the way he described it, it was so obvious. And when he said the part about the blue ruffled bathing suit, I remembered that like it was yesterday, because upon our arrival, I didn't have a bathing suit. And normally I would have received one. I was the youngest of the 5 girls. I would have had somebody's hand-me-down. I had no bathing suit. So we, all 7 of us, went across the street to one of those little souvenir shops, and we got my first brand new blue ruffled bathing suit. And by the way, Dave also had a pot belly. It wasn't just me. And he was obnoxious as all get out. Just a couple of years ago, I went through regression therapy, and I saw the whole thing, all the little details that I didn't remember. And he was screaming, "What a little brat." But anyway, I ended up having to share my peanut butter sandwich with him that day. But the bathing suit was etched in my mind forever.
So, Manuel, we started to know that we had something going on here because we had a memory from 1962 in this life when we were 3 and 4 years old. And then we had a memory from 1925 before either one of us were born. And at that point, we sort of lost our minds and just kept going.
Okay, so you guys had confirmation, you had proof of these memories being real. In your previous lives, you shared 29 lives. Did you intertwine like this, like on and off, like you would meet and then separate?
In some of those past lives, the experience is short. We met as kids in another life, and she was married off, and I never saw her again. There's been lives where we've been husband and wife. There's been lives where we've been brother and sister. She's been my mother. So we know that we come back playing many different roles, which is an interesting comment. And what we found is that we found other people in our lives also multiple times. So we know we return as family mates or another group which we call karmic mates, because there are people that either help you along in your lessons or people that actually test you that you'll see again because you have karma with them.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking too when I was reading the book. Like how shocking it would be to know that a family member or a friend was your couple in a previous life. So in this life, if you're not open-minded enough, then that would affect probably your relationship, right?
Correct. We had a day when I came in and started to give details on Ruby and JJ's relationship. And as we were sitting there, I literally became JJ Wright. And as I'm talking to Carla, she started to finish the sentences. And she had the same memory. And it was emotionally uncomfortable because we've been best friends forever, or 16 years, even though we met 50 years before. The fact that we started feeling some of those same feelings and talking the same way, it became really uncomfortable. We jumped up and
Very
we ran down the
uncomfortable.
hall. I'm like, okay, I can't talk to Carla anymore. How am I going to get out of this? We got to go down the hall because it felt strange.
Right, and you were married at the time, and Carla was married too, right, Carla?
Yes, yes. In fact, Tom, my husband, has been in like 16 of our lives. I've been his mother a couple times. I've been married to him a couple of times. He's murdered me a couple of times,
Oh,
and I still
wow.
married him in this life. Yes. Yeah, we just keep changing the role until we get it right. We play different roles, and it did kind of make me uncomfortable in the beginning when I thought, oh, because Tom was actually Ruby's father 2 lives ago. So he was my father then. He's my husband now. We, if we don't learn it in one capacity, we need to learn it, try it in another capacity, and see if we get it correct. Because there's those 5 simple rules, that we're supposed to be following. That maybe you were going to ask about, but Dave can explain whenever you're ready.
All right, before we go to the 5 simple rules, I want you to tell me now that we're into soul groups.
All right, soul groups. We have groups of people that, if this sort of makes sense, we physically are close to them when we're born, and we continue to return with them. So we actually come back as groups. So my own father has been my father a few times, or been a relative a few times. My mother's been there a few times. My grandmother I found in 4 or 5 different lives. We found Tom in a bunch of lives. We found Paula, who worked in the office, a few lives. Brenda, who worked in the office, we found her in a few lives. So these people that are close to us keep coming back. We know that there are people who believe in reincarnation who think that maybe we choose some of our family that we keep coming back to, but they're there to help us, and or potentially there to test us. So Carla has a sister that's been a little bit difficult for us in a few past lives.
A lot.
And she's still your sister.
Yeah, and still difficult.
It's still a little difficult. So those kind of things we still have to overcome, because we need to learn those 5 simple rules. And the 5 simple rules literally are to live without conceit, live without jealousy, live without
selfishness,
be forgiving, and always love in every single choice you make. Because any choice that's not a loving choice is a choice that you make by that kind of intention, forms some karma that you have to fix. So if you injure somebody or you hurt their feeling, there's a karma that's involved with that. And so you may have to come back in another life and fix it if you don't fix it in this one.
Mm-hmm. So as long as we learn to live by those 5 simple rules, then we pass the test, and what's next?
Well, either I have to tell you, Manuel, we must be at least slow learners, because it's taken 42 lives and we're still working on this. So the reality is there's lots of little mistakes that we need to learn. Sometimes we come back to help other people. So there may be a life Now, every time you come back to help somebody, you have a chance to develop some more karma. And conceit is so much present in everything. And if you look across history, because part of these are lessons from history, there's a life where we're Vikings and we're fighting against the Scottish, and then we're Scottish fighting against the English, and then we're English fighting the Scottish, because we're literally fighting ourselves. So we have to learn both sides of a lot of the issues so that we learn compassion, so that we're not judgmental anymore, because we're not really allowed to judge other people. The only thing we can really control is how we respond to what happens to us in this life. And if we respond loving and forgiving, we don't develop more karma.
Okay, so karma, would you say, is to get to know both sides of the coin?
Yes.
Part of it's getting to know both sides of the coin. You have to understand both sides.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a minimum of lives or a maximum of lives? Because I think, what's his name? I'll come back in a minute. But he said that we had 16 lives. Obviously, that's not the case. And a minimum?
I don't think there's a minimum exactly.
However,
we do know that Jesus only had one life, which is pretty interesting when you consider that. We know that Muhammad only had one life. So again, that's a pretty interesting comment that they told us. So it is possible to lead that life that's completely loving, on task, purposeful, where you experience enough experiences that you don't have to come back. So that's our goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the name is Rudolf Steiner. He's the one that said that we only have 16 opportunities, but I guess he was wrong. You just proved him wrong. Now, Dave, I read in the book, apparently you're in your last opportunity. So you should be walking around with a sign that says, "Please do not disturb, I'm in my last life."
Well, we believe that and because I've had a series of atonements where I've experienced my death, and I've experienced the time between lives where I've gone through my past life atonement, and they tell me, and past life atonement is where you do a past life review. They show you all the things that you've done wrong. So I experienced an entire experience of that, where I saw what I did wrong, and I've tried to make as many good choices as I can in this life, not let people control me, make decisions that are loving. So I'm very hopeful that both Carla and I could be in our last lives. We're hoping.
You notice he didn't say me, he said you.
Yeah, and one thing that many people don't consider is the transition between this life and the next life, or the space between lives, what we call death. When you've seen that transition, how does it look like?
It's very interesting because since about 700 BC, I've been passed over by the same little girl who was involved in one of my lives, who was extremely forgiving. We found out that Shanta, or Sheila, as we call her in a more English sounding name, that she was very forgiving because she was in the Mayan life that we had. And in that life, she died a horrible death during a sacrifice type of experience that I won't tell too much in because it's a horrible story in the book. However, when I experienced that, it's usually at the moment of death, she sees Shanta's hand, and she reaches down and takes mine. I suddenly travel through time, space, and eternity, and lights are flashing, and I'm actually falling 2 golden wings that flies me through at a time that I can't even explain, and it makes me want to cry, because every time I've experienced it, it has been incredibly beautiful. Then there's a small period of time when I'm extremely confused. I don't know because I can't experience things with the five senses because I'm not in a physical form. And then suddenly I'm in a group or a large room. There are spiritual beings with bright light kind of shining eyes that are around me. It feels like I'm in almost like I'm in a little jury room or courtroom. And they start to show me my past lives and mistakes that I've made and people that I've hurt. I've been a warrior in many lives, so I've seen myself kill people again. And when I see them killed again, they show me the families that lost their husband, crying because they didn't come back from war. So these experiences start to make you become very, very compassionate, and you start to realize that every single thing you do affects other people.
Right. Our intention is very powerful, even though we don't notice, they affect a great lengths. I wanted to know about the transition because at this moment, people are experiencing let's say
The near-death experiences.
near-death experiences and also initiation rituals. People are using substances, and these substances recreate or give you an insight of what that transition could be like. And Carla, you have a comment in the book about substances, and I'm not gonna give it away so people can go and read it in the book, but I wanted to know your opinion on the substances that expand our consciousness, like DMT, psilocybin.
Some of the plants that they're using and et cetera. Yeah.
Well, personally, I think that in order for one to make the best choices for themselves, you need to know yourself. How can you know yourself if you're altering your mind? It's not possible. And even with Dave, if he has a glass of wine, it's difficult for him to reach Isabella in the spiritual world. So when you alter yourself in any way, shape, or form, it's not being your best self. Now, do I drink wine once in a while? Yes, to relax. But anything else, where you're altering your mind like that on a regular basis, and there's effects. Just like when you overeat, there's effects. You're supposed to take care of yourself. You're supposed to, we grew up thinking, your body is your temple, and it's the only one you have here. So in order for your mind to work correctly, you have to feed it correctly, just like giving your car the right gasoline. So if you're not living in this world, how can you make the best choices? If you're living in a la-la land, or you're sending yourself off someplace else so you don't have to deal with your choices in your reality, then you're going to come back again. I mean, that's all there is to it. If you're allowing something like alcohol or drugs to own you, that's an issue. Nothing and nobody should own you.
And what do you think about substances like ayahuasca?
Again, I mean, I know some people do it for the right reasons. I just don't think it's necessary. If you meditate and you open yourself up, you religiously meditate, you will open up and you will be, I mean, that's almost like taking the easy way out because you want to get there, but you don't want to do the work. You got to do the work. Meditate, take the time because you'll feel better. You'll be more relaxed. The benefits of meditation. Dave, explain some of the benefits of meditation.
Well,
from a medical standpoint.
From a medical standpoint, as I was a physician, the studies show it actually lowers your blood pressure, decreases anxiety, lowers blood sugar. So it's great for hypertension, diabetes. It reduces cortisol, which is one of the reasons I was able to lose weight, because it decreases stress, which also increases cortisol, which makes you gain weight, which is part of the reason it helped me. It makes you perform better at work. A lot of Fortune 500 companies are doing meditation classes for their employees now because it actually improves their output, makes them able to concentrate better. It's actually shown to decrease dementia in older patients. So there's so many positive benefits to doing meditation without any drug assistance that I don't know why people don't all want to meditate. And then if you get an experience like ours, it becomes even more beautiful, because we've now experienced all these lives, all these lessons. And actually in the book, after every life, we discuss some of the lessons we learned in that life, because this is really the lesson, is that if you make the right choices, you don't have to go through some of the suffering, because some of the suffering is self-induced in this world. And we're actually infinite beings that have the potential to return back to God.
I see. Okay, if we go back to the people or the entities that you encounter when you passed over, you call them the council, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, and they're in charge of showing you previous lives?
Correct. They show us previous lives, and they're all souls who have completed their journey and have returned back to heaven or the spiritual.
There's 12.
12 in the
There's
council?
12.
Now, 12, that's a very significant number.
It really is. And actually, we have a new book coming out in March. It's called The Manual. Actually touches on all of the 12s, and how 12 is an important and significant number to God, and why.
Okay, numerology, you mention it too, but it's like not what you focus on. You focus on astrology and the influence it has on people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
And Carla, you have like a little formula with zodiac.
Yes, and actually in the manual, we have gone further than that. We have all the 12 zodiac signs, the 12 traits, and the 12 archetypes. So when God makes each one of us individually, all of those things are taken into consideration. Like, for instance, when is your birthday, Manuel?
March 26th.
Oh, March 26th. So you're in Aries, and you have the same angel that we have. You have the yellow angel, which is Mariel. And those colors often that you see when you're meditating are the colors of your angel. God has carefully given us an angel to help us, because in our previous lives, we showed signs of selfishness. So I'm an Aquarian, Dave's a Pisces, you're an Aries, and our angels are sectioned with our astrological signs into threes. There's 4 sets of threes. So Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries all fall under the yellow angel of selfishness. That doesn't mean you're selfish now, but you have an angel to help you in case you start to show those tendencies. It means in a past life you were selfish, and it doesn't just mean with your things. It could have been you were selfish with your time. And that's to help us work on it. Numerology, because our calendars have changed, it's not completely accurate. However, in numerology, your birthdays, God being 10, your birthdays, like for instance, mine is the 18th of February. So 1 and 8 equals 9. Okay, you reduce down the number, and anything that falls into the 369 category, everything is heartfelt, and you tend to do everything with your heart. Okay, everything in the 157, in other words, let's say your birthday is the 14th, so 1 and 4 is a 5. So anything in the 157, you're a little bit more technical, and anything in the 248, which is you tend to be a lot of black and white on some things, and very businesslike, kind of, either or. All of those go together, and that part of numerology is accurate. The other parts of numerology, trying to do your path and all of those things, they're all based on a calendar that we don't have anymore. So they're not terribly accurate.
Okay, and that's really interesting. And that new book, you're going to explain all that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so have you been given a different calendar to work with or just like the
No.
guidelines?
Isabella did not give us a calendar. She said it would be virtually impossible with that calendar. She did say, though, that Dave helped me on this one. In the Bible, if it says that somebody is, 120 years old, they're really not, because the calendar is different. I don't remember what the figure is. You actually multiply it times a certain number, and that will give you their actual accurate age.
Close to divided by 7, but
Yes.
so
Angels. Are angels the same as spirit guides?
No.
No.
Spirit guides have never been human. Angels have never been human. We do have guides that have been human, like Shanta that Dave talked about. She actually had a life. But our spirit guides have never been human, never will be. Their job is to learn human emotion, and they learn through us. So that's a good reason for us to behave and be our best self, because our spirit guides are learning what it's like, and you don't certainly want to show them the nasty side of you. You want to show them the loving side of you. Angels are direct extensions from God, as well as the spirit guides. The angels are given to us to help us and protect us. And like we said, with you and Dave and I, we all have that yellow angel Mariel, and sometimes you have other angels that jump in to assist you.
Okay, so when we're praying or trying to contact that realm, who should we go to? Talk to our spirit guides, talk to our angels, talk to God directly?
Well, my personal thoughts on this, and this is what Isabella has shared with us, I pray to thank only. I don't pray to ask for anything. If I ask for something, it's like I don't trust the process and I don't trust God. God has everything already lined up. For me to pray for something, it means I think that I know more than God. And I think that I need something right now, where God knows exactly when and if I need that something. So I only think. But when you're talking, when you feel like you need help, you can ask your angel or you can ask Isabella. But when you're praying, it's to thank.
We're looking at angels and all the positive side of creation. What about, because this universe, as we understand, there's duality in it, so there's got to be a counterpart. Have you ever gotten any information or any messages about that negative aspect, what we would call evil, darkness?
yes, we have. First thing you need to know is some of this is a little biblical history, but there really is no Satan. Man creates his own evil by making those conceited, selfish, and jealous decisions. Now, this seems like God left us on our own out here, but I got to kind of explain this. When the human form started to evolve well enough along that we could actually make conscious decisions not to hurt each other, it wasn't living on instinct, he placed a soul in each of us. And the role of that soul is to carry our karma, carry us life to life. But what really happens here is that we have to grow along this path where we grow. Now, the instinctual part is we know that we're being threatened by the outside world. So we have to have a protective mechanism, that fight or flight that exists. And fight or flight is really a part of our conceited self. So we're created in such a way that if the lion runs at you, you will try to stop and fight the lion or run. If we're hungry, we will try to kill for food. Because without those instincts embedded in us, we would not be alive today. However, we've evolved far enough now that we don't need to kill for food. We don't need to beat the neighbor down and make him feel bad. We don't need to steal and covet the neighbor's things, because really, if we live this loving life, there's enough for all of us. Now, we have a lot of problems in the world. We have figured out how to distribute all the food that we have and those kind of things. And we don't take very good care of this world. So we're not making it sustainable, which is a problem because we're leaving this world to ourselves. So we have to make some choices there on how to make the world sustainable, how to make good, loving choices, how to get the food to people who are hungry. But we really do have enough on this world if we just cooperate.
Mm-hmm. Now, that brings to my mind, when you remember these past lives, is there something from those lives that could help us, that we still need to work on? Again, meditate on them and maybe learn?
Well, what happened with us after about 4 years into this, we'd really written everything for the book, but we went to past life regression training with Dr. Brian Weiss because we wanted to know if there were ways we could help other people too. Because there are lessons in the past life that can help you in this life. If you've known that your personality's been very selfish for life after life, then certainly that's something you need to work on. I guess the good lesson for all of us is that even if you don't know your past lives, you can still work on not being selfish, not being jealous, not being conceited.
And you'll know by your angel what your past mistakes were. So if you know when your birthday is, we have a chart in the book, the new one, the manual, and the chart actually shows your birthday with the angel, the color angel. So that's one of the things right away you'll know. And if you read your astrological sign, you know your tendencies, and it's not to make us feel bad about ourselves because, none of us are perfect. We've all been sinners and continue to be. But if you know that you have a tendency towards selfishness, then don't be that way. And if you're, an Aries and you know that you're stuck in your head a lot, or, whatever the tendencies are with an Aries, I don't want to name them. You'll feel bad. No, because it's not about that. It's to overcome them, right? It's to overcome them. And we can all do it. We have help. We have spirit guides and angels.
Right. And you have very specific examples about those 5 simple rules. I try to get away, like not fall into any of those examples, but there was no way out. I was like, maybe if I look this way, I can get away, but not
Yes.
really. And you also talk about dreams. How important are dreams?
Well, there's 2 things that happen in dreams. A lot of people do get past life memories in dreams, especially if they remember them right at that time between waking up and falling asleep. Because again, waking up and falling asleep puts you in the same wavelength that past life hypnosis does. It's the same wavelength in your brain that happens when you meditate. And so those memories that you can get from some of your dreams can be past lives and are areas to explore. Now, we also have a subconscious plan that works through some dreams to help us deal with issues in our lives. So sometimes if you have a dream, it's not always a past life. Sometimes it is something you're really working on currently, and you're still working on it when you're sleeping.
I see. So have you ever had a lucid dream?
Absolutely have lucid dreams. I have the most lucid past life memories. Carla actually taped me one day while I was having a past life memory. And we didn't know it, but she was sort of doing a little bit of past life regression at that time because she was asking questions. And I start to become an 8-year-old boy. And while I'm the 8-year-old boy, I started to stutter. And I haven't stuttered in this life, but in that life, I stuttered and it was hard to get the words out. And she got excited because I was stuttering and crying and going through. So I literally become the character. There's a life in Bermuda where I'm an indentured servant. So I'm dark skinned in that life. And it's a British colony, and I actually start to have a British accent while I'm discussing it. We've even found things in past lives where in Chicago, for some reason, every time JJ got ready and dressed, he put on his trousers. However, in England, Robert would get out his breeches. And so those words that seemed to come up were the words that were used in that appropriate time frame. We've actually found words that we didn't know the meaning of, and we had to look them up. In our second book, Hell No Reincarnation, we used the word ahav and ahava, which is to love and to give lovingly. And we didn't know what those words were, but they kept coming up. And we looked them up, and they're a Hebrew word that means to love and to give lovingly. So sometimes those things surprised us. Most of the time they move us, because we find that if there's words that don't exactly translate, the old word still comes through.
Okay. And would you say that we carry traits from other lives? Like, I've noticed that Carla has been taking her blue eyes throughout many lives.
Throughout many lives. And a lot of times it's how I recognize her in some of the past lives. The steel blue eyes are there, and they have that same smile and same warmth, and they pull you right in. And in those lives, I almost immediately know it's her. Now, there's been lives where she's been a dark skin too, and she's had dark eyes, and still it's the eyes that somehow pull you in.
It's the soul you recognize.
That's why they say that the eyes are the window to the soul, right?
Yes, it's the soul that you recognize, yes.
All your story is shocking, and I'm sure every time you discover something new, it's shocking. But what's like the most impressive life or experience that you have found so far?
Well, I'll tell you the story that moved me the most is in the middle of this. I took a trip to England with my sister, her husband, and my niece. And when I got to England, we jumped off the plane, and we were all jet lagged and everything else, but we took off to the Museum of London. And I walked into the Museum of London, and I was standing in front of the bust of Ramesses II. And I started to hear clink, clink, clink. And I went back into a life, and I was carving the bust that was standing in front of me. And as we explored that life, it was from 1275 BC. And I had worked in Memphis, Egypt, and then was recruited, if you want to say that, because I was a stone cutter, and Carla's name was Carlise, and we moved to the Valley of the Kings, and we worked on the tombs of Ramesses II.
Oh gosh, that's impressive.
But my best memory would not be that life. It would be the next one that Dave witnessed on that trip.
Uh-huh.
And that would be in England, when his name was Robert and my name was Sarah, because we had complete and utter love for each other. We were probably the closest thing to perfect that we could ever be in any of those lives. The worst thing that I ever did was put red on the dress I wore to church, which I guess was a no-no back in those days. But it was the perfect life where we were good to each other, good to others. And it's nice to know that in all of those lives that at least once you almost got it right.
And it's a really great story in the book, because there's a time in that where Sarah gives up her gold locket that I bought for her, and Sarah is dying of consumption, and we're getting ready to leave to the new country, and she gives up her locket so someone else can go on the boat because she can't make the trip and she knows she's not going to make it. And she continues to tell me to have faith, to take care of our family. And I might cry because there's a moment.
Yeah.
That should have been your last life, Carla, right there. That would be like the ultimate sacrifice.
It should have been. But the interesting thing about that is that our next door neighbor and her son wanted to go to America. And that's why I said, take my locket, because I won't be able to make the trip. And in this life, she actually worked with us at the office, and she also was raising a son. She followed us to this life.
Oh, wow.
So it was so great to meet her again.
I mean, once we're mature enough to access all this information, it will be incredible to recognize those people again.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is something we try to tell people too. You have to be a little careful with younger children. A lot of the memories, especially the first memories you get back, are frequently traumatic. So you don't want to have 12-year-olds remember being shot in an alley because they're not mature enough to handle the situation, because it can be very
bad enough for us.
So yes, we try to discourage people under the age of 18, 16 for sure, that they shouldn't do any past life regression or past life memory work. And probably it's even better if you've had even more years of experience under your belt, because if you've never had anything negative happen in your life and the first past life memory you get is being shot in an alley or speared because you're in Roman times in the middle of a battle, those are pretty scary memories. If you've been shot in the Civil War or shot at in the Civil War, like there's a memory in the book where that happens to me. Those kind of experiences are not easy for people to cope with, let alone if they find out they've killed someone, or if, especially if they've killed someone in a situation. There's a life that Carla kills me. It's very early on, and it was very hard because in all these other lives, our experience has been good together, and then there's this life where she kills me. Well, if that's the first memory you have, and maybe I wouldn't want to deal with Carla anymore.
Right, that's what I was going to say. If we're working with forgiveness and you recognize somebody who killed you before, or, I don't know, they defraud you somehow and ruin your life, then I'm sure, you're going to just want to choke them, and all your work with forgiveness goes down the drain.
Yes, and you read in the book, our next door neighbor has been in 21 of our lives. He recently moved, but even in this life, it was very difficult. He was a very difficult man to get along with, and we steered clear because we didn't want to create more karma with him. But he was in our very first life together and in 20 other lives. So we've had some definite karma with this man. And, you have to, if someone's really toxic to you, you shouldn't go out of your way to stay around them. You should forgive them, be kind, but don't stay in their life, because you have the potential to create more karma.
That's what I was going to ask. When do you think or believe that we finally forgave someone? Somebody did something to me, and I say that I forgive them, but every time I think about that person, I still my teeth get cringed together.
Yeah.
Well, there's an easy way to deal with that. Just think to yourself that I was probably just like him in another life. And can I judge myself for that? No more than you can judge him.
And forgiveness is about forgiving yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes the reaction that they instill in you. If you feel angry every time you see them, they're actually controlling you. You're letting them control you. They're changing who you are. You're not being your best self. You're being angry, bitter. All of those emotions start to flood you. you can't possibly make a forgiving and loving choice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As we talk about people being mirrors for us to understand ourselves.
Yes.
Correct.
So true. Very true.
Going back to dying and transitioning and not being a very traumatic experience. Now you talk about also suicide. Now this could be a double-edged sword because if somebody's thinking about committing suicide and they find out that it's not as hard, and there is no hell, what would stop them?
That's a great question. Here's the problem. This is the same problem with killing someone else. If you kill someone else or you kill yourself, in both of those cases, you're limiting their ability to learn the lessons they were meant to learn in this life. And so if they kill themselves, any of the karma that they haven't fixed is coming back. So if they kill themselves, they basically negated this life, and any lesson that they learned that they thought was hard in this life, which drove them to their suicide, is going to come back, and they're going to have to live that same experience again. So committing suicide doesn't get you out of an experience. It just means that you have to relive it. So if you
it's a very selfish act.
Yes, because you hurt so many other people. Mm-hmm. And when you do your past life review, you're going to see everyone who's crying because you did this. You're going to see your children, if you're an adult, who lived without a father and how that affected them. You're going to see how your wife or girlfriend responded because you took their life and how bad you hurt them and the trauma they went through, the financial difficulties you may have put them through because they weren't able to make the house payment because you killed them. They had to move. All of those things create just more karma for you and more experiences that you're going to have to go through when you come back.
Okay. So it amplifies the things that you're going to have to deal with later on.
Correct.
And it could be reversed. Maybe the life that you come back to, your spouse commits suicide and you have to live through what they just did.
Oh gosh. No, you don't want to do
that.
Then.
Yeah. So you have to kind of look at all sides of this. I had the privilege to experience my father's atonement when he died in this life. And when I watched that, they were going back through some of his past lives. And in a past life, he was a slave trader where he split families apart and locked men into the hull of his boat and took them across the ocean and sold them. In the next life, one of the next lives after that, his wife died in childbirth, so he lost his wife just like he had split them. His daughter was abducted and kidnapped, so he lost his daughter just like he had done to other people. And in the very next life, when he was my father, this present life, he spent the last 20 years of his life chained into a wheelchair because he got Parkinson's. So it may not be chained into a boat. You may not be the slave to a slave owner, but you may be a slave to your wheelchair. You may become an alcoholic and be a slave to alcohol. So you just have to consider that karma is going to come somehow. And you're going to have to either overcome it in that life. So if you become an alcoholic, you may have to beat the alcoholism in that life, or you're going to come back enslaved again in some way, shape, or form in the next life that you have to overcome.
I see. What about Deja Vu? Now that I have you here and I have limited time, I have to squeeze as much information as I can from you because you're the guys that have direct access. I mean, I don't have it yet, so I want to reach.
Keep working on it, man. So
yes.
Deja Vu is very likely that it's related to past lives or people. You've met someone in your life where you sat down and started to talk and you felt like you knew them forever and the conversation flows freely, and it probably is someone you've known. Or if you're in a situation where you think, sort of like watching the horror movie. I shouldn't open this door because I've been at this door before. And when you open the door, it's going to be something bad on the other side. That's because you've had that experience before. It's shared in your subconscious. It's that past life memory that's trying to either protect you or encourage you along. You think this experience seems wonderful. I've got to keep going. Well, it's because it may have been wonderful in the past.
Okay. Now, when you talk about subconscious, can we consider that as the Akashic Records or the Book of Life that they talk about in the Bible, like some imprints of our actions?
Yes.
Yes. And that's exactly how we interpret it. The Akashic Record is really your soul record that can be tapped into. There are those that are very gifted Akashic Record readers. We know a wonderful lady who's 82, and when we met her, it was incredible because she said, "I'd like to draw a few of past lives," and she sent us the pictures, not knowing what we knew our past lives were, and she hit 2 of them right on the head. So there are some people who are very gifted at this.
And she's been in several of our lives. You can always tell when you feel their energy, just like with you. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt we will find you in another life.
I don't know if you guys heard of Edgar Casey. That's when I first
Yes.
heard about soul groups. And every single person that he made a reading for, they were all related to him in a different life. So that's what came to me a couple days before when I was reading your book. I'm like, oh my God, I'm sure we met somewhere before.
Yes, I feel
Because
it, definitely.
There's always a time where we run into people because we're meant to meet them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I was meant to meet Carla, and we met when we were 2 and 3. And then
3 and 4.
3 and 4, yes. And then it's 35 years later before we met again. Those kind of things mean there's a draw somewhere that's going to bring you together.
Right. And we can call them, as Jung called them, synchronicities.
Yes.
Have you had any insight on that? Like, have you had any explanation? How do synchronicities work?
Well, some of it works because we're drawn to people. Some of them are related to your spirit guide, because whether you hear them or not, they're speaking to you. And we've found this as we've looked through past lives. Either our names repeat some of the time, or a name like our name repeats. I've been Robert a few times. I was Rodebert in Old English time, which is really Robert again. I've been David before. Carla's been Carla, Carlise, Cara. So we know that those names follow. She's also been Susan a few times, and so some of those names keep following. And when we find our children in some of those lives, those names are all followed through in our lives too. There's multiple Elizabeths that show up. Carla's spirit guide is Elizabeth. Sometimes the spirit guide is giving you a hint on what to name your children, and it passes through your family. And so it doesn't have to pass like ancestry does. Sometimes it passes through your soul family. And if we look back how many times we cross in lots of different lives, you really get to the point where it's potential that almost all of us are somehow related.
Mm-hmm. When I heard the first time that we choose our names because they have a certain power, it gives us some tools, energetically to work on this life, that made me think that there is a plan. Do we know that plan when we are born again?
Some of it.
We know some of our plans. Yes, we know the situation we're coming into. However, we also have free will. And free will is very important for a couple reasons. The most important one is you can't choose to love if it's forced. So if you can't make a decision that's free will, you can't really love. And that's really important. And the other part is we can't be controlled by anybody. If we're controlled, none of our decisions are free will decisions. And so, since we're responsible for our own actions, we have to have free will, or else we can't change any of our destiny. We can't start to correct our karma. We can't avoid more karma if we don't have free will.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of have the power of decision once we are entering into this life.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just our names that follow us. There's also objects. At the cover of your book, there's a very particular object, and you also have the story for it. You have followed the story till now. Can you tell me about it?
Go ahead, Carla.
It is so awesome because I own that ring now. Dave actually had that ring duplicated by a computer from his memory, with using Isabella standing in the jewelry store saying, nope, more like this, more like that, because that exact ring is on the hand of our great granddaughter. She's from Chicago. We are not allowed to contact them because it would change their path and their choices. But if they happen to see our book and they read the book, from reading the book, they will know that it's their ring, first of all, because it's an exact replica. But the things that we told in the story about their lives, how could anybody possibly know those things, the details, if they weren't given to us spiritually?
And so we're asking Manuel that the ring that's on the front cover is from a stone in Scotland from 896 AD. So that stone has traveled 1,100 years.
And it has changed hands 34 times, which is the number of lives that I have had.
Oh, wow. So either the ring has been following you or you've been following the ring.
I think it's both.
You see, you need to work on your attachments.
Yes, exactly.
It's a ruby ring, and it's fascinating that her name was Ruby Donaldson in 1925 when she owned the ring.
And that's what I was going to say. There's a very strong link there.
Yes.
So those synchronicities keep happening. And there's another one in the book that's interesting. It's related to Ruby's life. We actually made a trip back to Chicago, went to Little Italy. We went for a walk in Little Italy, and Isabella was trying to give us a few hints. You're getting warm, because I was trying to go on JJ's memory and turn down a street, and she says, it's close, it's close. And we actually looked up, and there was the apartment that Ruby Donaldson lived in 1925, from my memory. And the name of the apartment building was the Isabel Apartments, which was amazing. And then we had a friend who went back to Chicago, because we didn't really think about it, but a friend went back to Chicago, went into the records, and found out that the building had been there since 1899 and had been an apartment building ever since. Mm-hmm. So it was there in 1899. Ruby lived in it in 1925, and it's still an apartment building on Loomis Street in Chicago currently.
So Ruby, Isabella is like Groundhog Day, the movie, over and over.
Absolutely.
And now if we move on to another movie, Back to the Future, do we live the timeline as we understand it from past, present to future, or we jump back and forth?
All right. So I'm going to tell you, you can't do that. Even though there are people who believe in parallel life possibilities. They've used quantum physics to twist some metaphysical extra rules into here. All of our lives, we went back and we tried to look at all of the lives, and we went through, and there's actually no lives that occur at the same time. They all occurred in a linear form. We actually experience things in a linear form, cause and effect in the physical plane, because without a cause and effect, karma doesn't matter. If all lives occur at once, nothing matters because we can't learn anything. Learning requires time. And so when we go back, we actually see a linear timeline. Now, if you're asking me, does time exist the same way on the non-physical plane? I don't think there's any argument that it does not. But even in quantum physics, in this physical plane, time is still a measured vector. Time, speed, all of those things are used when they do the mathematical formulas using quantum physics. They've just tried to make some big quantum jumps when they're trying to argue that this means that we're all living parallel lives. In fact, quantum physics, because I've tried to read all I can on this too, quantum physics says if there is a parallel existence or a parallel universe, nobody on any of the reincarnation topics ever discussed this, but it says the two universes, since you don't live in both of them, you can't observe them and they can't affect each other. So even if there is another universe that's parallel, it can't affect us here. It doesn't matter. The only thing you can affect is the life you're living today.
Excellent. Yeah, I was gonna ask about that because there was a guy, I believe his last name is Goldman. He's the one that talked about the doppelgangers, the double.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's not the other half of you. It is probably what we call podmates. It's another very complicated situation, but actually,
which is also in the manual that's coming out. We talk all about your pod brothers and sisters.
So those are souls that were with you from the very beginning, before your first incarnation. We know one of Carla's podmates because she's been in our life multiple times. They're sort of present so that if you're not there at the right time, because you don't all die at the right moment, somebody is there to fill that space. That makes sense. So if you get off cycle, you may find that your podmate fills in for you. But it is not your split soul. It's not a part of you. They have some similarities. Certainly in this life, people have told Carla that her podmate and her look like mother and daughter.
I see. And what about when people say that we need to get in touch with our higher selves? What is that?
Okay, so I'm going to explain it as Isabella has explained it. There is God. We are all sparks of love from God. From God, there's a line directly through your spirit guide. If you want to call it a tether, you can. There's no physical tether. It is the energy that flows straight from God to you. If there's such a thing as a higher self, it's God. And God is the one who created you. God's, if you want to say spit himself into or herself into pieces, you can say that. But there is no higher self. There's not a part of you that you leave behind. What you leave behind is your spirit guide, who was also in a pod close to you. And so the spirit guide is your direct connection. So I think they are either experiencing their spirit guide, who they're speaking to, or they're experiencing their direct connection to God.
I see. Have you had any insight on life in different planets?
Well, we haven't really discussed much about the reincarnation research yet. However, the reincarnation research that's out there, that's done by Ian Stevenson, Jim Tucker, Jim Matlock now, it actually doesn't support any cross-species reincarnation. There are no memories of children that actually come back as an animal or have been a plant or a rock or a space alien. Now, so the research that's out there doesn't support any cross-species. So Isabella tells us there really are no lives on other planets yet. So there's no one that can reach us. And again, that's one of those lessons from Isabella. No one is coming to save you from another planet. No one is coming to attack you from another planet. You're responsible for your own actions. There's no other higher, stronger, smarter being out there that's going to come and save you.
All right, so we need to get our tax dollars from the Space Force then.
Yes, we need to continue the space. If we don't take care of the planet.
And what do you say about ESP abilities like telekinesis or telepathy? Are they real, and if we can develop them?
I believe there are people gifted in those things. There are people who have extremely strong gifts related to giving energy to others. I know that there's some Reiki practitioners that are extremely fantastic. When I connect, a lot of times I start to get tired and worn down, and I have Reiki sometimes, and it really does energize me. So there are people with gifts that can focus that energy. We found out that energy is really from the Archangel Michael. Now, we don't call them archangels because they don't believe in having any kind of hierarchy, but Michael, the angel, actually focuses blue light, God's universal energy, down, and people who have Reiki are able to focus that light. So I think there are gifts that people have, and there are certainly mediums that are very gifted. I rely so much on Isabella that I don't really look at that as my gift, and I certainly don't try to prophesize because Isabella doesn't want us to do that.
Is the human race special because of free will? Like if we compare it to angels and archangels and other entities and...
Yes, they have. It's completely different because if at your moment of creation, you have never ever been separated from feeling complete love, you really don't have a choice when you have complete love. It's what you're used to. There's no experience of absence of that love. So when you have the experience of absence of the love, that is actually when free will matters, because then you need to choose it again. And that's really a human condition.
Now, you were brought up both Catholic.
I pretty much was at least borderline Catholic all the way up till this experience.
Uh-huh. You talk about all the rituals are really not necessary.
Correct. The rituals out there are all just experiences that the church came up with to make things the same, so that people are actually indoctrinated with, you do this every time, we all get up and kneel every time. I don't like to, because I think there's some truth in all religions. Now, if you watch a movie on the Holocaust, you're going to see every Nazi soldier respond exactly the same way with the same exact motions. If you put us all in little pews and we all kneel and stand and sit and do everything exactly at the same time, it's a form of indoctrination. And we don't need that to speak to God. There's actually was a movement, Carla might have to tell me the year, I don't remember. It might be 1100, where it was called Molinism, which was where there were many church leaders that were trying to make it so that you didn't have to go to church. You could meditate and reach God directly.
It was during Pope Innocent the 11th. Yes.
Yeah. And he actually outlawed it, because if the people start to believe they can reach God without the church, then the church loses its power.
I know. Once those mediators go out the door, then we don't need them
Then
anymore.
everybody has their ability to do it straight to God. And I think that's one of the lessons even in our book. And that's some of the lessons in the second book, which is Hell No Reincarnation, is we went back and we tried to kind of get our Catholic upbringing and tried to reconcile with some of the history. And as we went back, we found that Origen of Alexandria in 200 AD, who was really the writer of almost all of the Catholic doctrine, his early teachings include reincarnation, transmigration of the soul, pre-existence of the soul, and 200 years later, he was excommunicated after his death from the church, and all of his writings were destroyed because he was still teaching that reincarnation was possible. And if you look at even some biblical things, you find that even as Jesus is talking, he says that his return will be within your lifetime. So you either have to believe that Jesus meant that he's going to return in the next 40, 50 years, or you have to believe that Jesus is going to return because we're going to return over and over and over again. Because if I return, it'll be in a lifetime of yours. So if you read some of those statements, you start to look at a little bit different picture. And we also look at the Bible from a version that's a great resource. There are certainly many lessons. If you look at the Old Testament, what is the Old Testament? The Hebrew or Jewish people screw up and God gives them another chance. They screw up again and God gives them another chance. He might even send angels down to help them and give them another chance. He destroys their enemies and gives them another chance. Or you can consider that a story that says, I love you, my children, and if you screw up, I'm going to give you another chance, which is what reincarnation is. And Kabbalist Jews still believe in reincarnation and still teach that. There are still Gnostic Christian groups that teach reincarnation. Certainly, it's visible in Hindu and many Eastern religions where they talk about reincarnation. Reincarnation has been present since in the history, since the early 2700 BC, when the pharaohs believed when they died, they would return. In fact, some of the early Orisis myths are the pharaoh will die, you have to put them in a big tomb, you bury them with their slaves and their household, and you leave food there for their trip for 3 days because they're going to return in 3 days as a god. So those stories exist for all of the eternity of humankind.
Yeah, also the Buddhists, that's how they choose their Dalai Lama, right?
That's right, by reincarnation. And actually, the current Lama says that he's not going to reincarnate, which is an interesting fact just in general.
And there's been also a lot of proof, especially with kids, and it's hard to deny those stories. Like you have little kids telling stories about being married, living in different parts of the world that they never even heard of.
There's a couple really great stories. There's a story about a young boy who believed he was a World War I pilot, and he knew the names of everybody on his plane. He knew the mechanics' names. He knew the name of the plane. Things you can't coach a 3-year-old on. There's a story in India where a young boy says, where's my wife? She lives in a blue house in such and such a community. And his family drove to the community, drove up and down the roads, found the blue house. He ran up to the house. He knocked on the door. When the woman answered, he said, hello, and he used her name. And then he said, there's money upstairs buried under the floorboard. And they ran up the steps, and he turned right because he knew where the bedroom was. And he says, it's under that board. And they opened the board, and there was $4,000 buried under the board. You can't coach a 3-year-old to have that memory. There are, I think it's 2,400 cases now of Ian Stevenson, Jim Matlock, and Jim Tucker across the world where they've found those, and they're finding more every day.
Right. Is that what encouraged you to share your experience, your story?
That's a big part of it, yes.
For me, there's a part of it that is God is present in our experience. And there is almost no denying, because I started to do the research, and then we found a past life where we could, find the details. And there were details we didn't know. There were things we couldn't possibly know. And places that existed that we didn't know existed. We found a past life, and as we're experiencing it, Isabella says, well, it's in trace. I didn't know what that was. We went back and we found trace. It was a life 3,400 years ago where Bulgaria, Turkey, and Italy meet. It was a place that no longer exists. Well, if you have that experience, you start to say, we're infinite beings, that what we do matters because it depends on what's going to happen to us in our next life. And God exists, and there's a potential that we can all come home. We have to share that with somebody.
And we shouldn't have to go through life afraid of everything. We shouldn't have to go through life wondering what happens when we die. People are so afraid of death, and they shouldn't be. I mean, when you go through counsel, and I've lived a little bit of it too, they're not scolding you and throwing you into the fire. They're showing you what you did and saying, come on, learn from it. You shouldn't have to be so afraid of dying, but you should know why you're here, the correct reasons for why you're here. It's not to gain money. It's not to gain notoriety. It's to be kind. It's the interactions with the other people. It's the love. For most people, when you give someone a Christmas gift, don't you feel better giving that present than getting it? That's how it should be. I mean, presents aren't even necessary unless they're, it's something personal, very personal, but it shouldn't have to be the biggest and the best. But to know the truth, I thank God every night that we now know the truth, that we don't have to wonder what's going to happen, what comes next, what happens when I die. We don't have to wonder. It's right there, and it was all in front of us, and it's so simple.
And the next thing that's liberating is it's not too late to affect your karma now. Love can overcome the karma. And so if that's true, all we have to do is start making those loving choices now.
Mm-hmm.
And then this life or your next life doesn't have to be as bad. Can be an improvement. And those around you can be improved. And if you start being better to people, everybody starts to be better. It's much like you said with the ripple effect earlier.
The waves.
You walk down the street and you smile, and the next person smiles back, and they smile at somebody else, and the world starts to become a better place.
Right. Completely agree with that. Let's talk about that quote you have about faith and deeds. I like that a lot.
I'll try to get the quote correctly, because it's actually a quote that's related to the Bible, and this will be paraphrased. It says,
remember, he's 61 years old. It's hard to remember everything. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. Some will say, you have faith and I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. And then Isabella suggested that we read that passage and take it to heart.
And it's one of these experiences that we've had while writing the book to find those things that Isabella told us to look for. It's also the experience of a lot of mystical people throughout life. We know that the churches start to push the idea of grace, that we're all saved by grace. But that's even in the Bible, and James says it's not just grace. You exist by grace alone, but you're saved by your actions. And that in itself is the definition of karma and God's love.
That brings the balance of destiny and free will.
Yes.
It's the balance between the two.
Excellent, excellent. Is there anything else do you feel like people should know or you want to transmit to people?
Well, when I was growing up, I had religion forced down my throat.
Uh,
So I almost could never tolerate it when somebody started to talk about, pushing God down my throat.
mhm,
And honestly, now I feel like in a way that's kind of what we're doing, but it's because God is so darn nice.
mhm.
I mean, we've talked to him, her, because God does emulate female and masculine traits. It's both, just like we all have masculine and feminine traits. Our spirit guides and angels are all masculine and feminine. How can you be a complete person without both sides?
Yeah, I think it's embedded in our mind the way we're wired. We put things in
Yes.
boxes. So they create their own
Yes.
God. They put it in this box and then they want to
Yes.
sell it to you. That's what I feel
Yes.
the problem comes.
But God's not jealous. God's not mean. All of the things that we heard. I mean, I just the other day, and this is the strangest thing where they come to you, but if you put yourself in a meditative state, I was at the hairdresser under the hairdryer, and God comes to me in a gold color. I see him like a burst of gold color. And I'm going to say he and she was there for almost a half an hour while I was under that dryer. And as soon as I came home, I mean, I knew it was God. I could feel it. And I wanted to know the reason. So I said to Dave, I appreciate it so much. But what was the message that I was supposed to receive? And Dave, do you remember what the message was?
No, you should keep going because I don't remember this moment.
Okay, the message was that I'm always joking around and I say, oh, I hope I made it this time. I hope I graduate. And God said through Isabella to Dave, stop saying that. That's judging myself, and I should be thinking positively. But don't you just appreciate that so much?
Right.
I mean, this great big God who takes time out from everybody and takes the time to remind me of that. I mean, I just think it's so very cool. It's awesome.
And is it, there's no time frame when it's sort of an unwritten law that, except for Muhammad, after Jesus's time, they basically said God didn't speak to anybody. 2,000 years went by and God has never tried to reach another person. Yet, for the 4,000 years before Jesus's time, God is talking to people all of the time. And we really don't look and see what's out there because we really find Christian, Jewish, Muslim mystics that have been practicing for thousands of years. And they're all having experiences. And there are people all around the country and all around the world that still have experiences where they're experiencing God.
Yes,
And
we're not alone. We're not the only ones. If you get onto these reincarnation sites, many people are talking to God. It seems to be the only ones in church are the ones that are not talking to God.
Yeah, maybe it was because they were calling them witches and
Yes,
they ended up dead. That's why they had to hide. And
yes,
now it feels different.
it is.
thankfully.
We've been able to connect with like-minded people, people who have the same
Yes,
feelings.
it's so great.
And I'd say for most people that this experience from God through your spirit guide to you is personal. It's
Very.
it's a personal experience. And that all of us have that potential to have that personal experience. And whether you call God, or whether you call God the creator, or the source, or the Tao, or whatever your experience is with the all knowing, all powerful creator of this experience, it's personal. You each have your own individuality. None of you are special, but everybody's special because you each have this personal experience. And that's one of those lessons, and one of the lessons we keep trying to share for people is God has reached out to you specifically, created you specifically, just as you are. You are absolutely fantastic as you are. You don't have to be somebody else, and somebody else who expects you to be somebody else is trying to change you and control you. You need to be the real you and love and make loving choices, because that's the soul that God created, is the real you. So let it out.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
I know. Yeah, a lady I talked to, I interviewed her and she had a near death experience. When I asked her to compare the God that was presented to her in church and the God that
Yes.
she met during that experience, the only word that she could describe him with was unconditional.
Yes.
Yes. There's been a multiple times where Carla and I have broke down crying during this experience, because each and every time there's been a direct connection to God, it's overwhelming. Beautiful.
I'm crying under the hairdryer.
Because that experience is something that we can't put into words. It's unbelievably warm, comforting, loving, accepting, all of those words that mean I love you. And we're writing this book that we're currently working on, the manual. And there's a moment when God says he can't wait till all of his children come home. Joyful hallelujah is what God says. So there's no way that that's not personal.
Right, right. You also describe a lot when you have experiences or you see, let's say, other energies, you see eyes. And that reminds me a lot of Alex Gray. All the psychedelic artwork he's got is just eyes. And people who have these experiences, they all go with the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
The eye seems to pull us in every time. This isn't the most amazing experience, but the first time I saw an angel eye, I almost was uncontrollable, because I was actually about the only time during this experience that was really fearful, because it felt immense, bigger than life, bigger than I was, bigger than the world was, bigger than the universe. The eye of an angel will overwhelm you. They try to tone that down so that you're not freaked out, but this time it was so large that it like swallowed me. And if you think of that and then imagine somehow God is larger than that.
Is that why the symbology of the all-seeing eye everywhere?
Yes.
I believe so.
Angels are not really what we expect them to be.
No, their personalities, like the spirit guides, unbelievable. Because, when we write our books, we're inspired and we have help. And Estes, who is my angel, also called Metatron, has helped us to write the books along with Isabella and Elizabeth. And they are quite funny. Their personalities, some of the things they say and they come up with. I mean, if people could just listen to their own, it's just so unreal but real. It's so loving and they're so funny. They have great personalities.
Oh wow, that's so interesting.
You've heard Metatron? Yeah.
Yeah, the Metatron's cube.
Oh yes. Well, Estes, is the one that is the scribe for God. So is it any wonder that Estes would be the scribe for us? He helps us write.
So now, have you had any insight on geometry, what people call sacred geometry?
Oh,
you keep talking about all our upcoming books.
It's just to entice people to.
Yes, the next book, the manual, talks about the Dodecahedron, and there'll actually be a dodecahedron on the front of the book. It is a 12-sided. Each face is a pentagon. It was told that it was designed as our initial home, because you can actually, this strangely shaped 3-dimensional structure will stack on itself and have absolutely no voids. Yes. So all of these stacked together is the initial structural home of all the souls when they were created. And as we were doing some research for the book, there is actually some cosmology studies, and actually the dodecahedron is one of the proposed shapes of the universe.
Interesting, incredible. See, that's where
We
telepathy
are.
I was talking
You seem
about.
to know what to ask. I think you're really connected up there. Yeah.
All right. So again, there's 12 faces, there's 12 zodiac signs, there's 12 traits, there are 12 archetypes. There have been, 12 and a dozen. A foot is 12 inches long. We talk
12
about
apostles.
12 apostles. We talk about the fact that we've divided the day into two 12-hour chunks, and we divided the year into 12 months. All of these things keep occurring in nature based, on supposedly the lunar about 30 days till it comes back to a full moon. But all of these things occur in nature. And I am reading a book by another man right now. I can't think of his name, but he's actually discussing that there may be a way someday that we're going to pinpoint using mathematics, maybe quantum physics, maybe the field theory, that there actually is a signature of God that we can identify. That is a shape.
And it's a dodecahedron.
It could be the dodecahedron because 12 show up everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else? Now that we're already into your new book, besides astrology, sacred geometry, is there any sacred? Well, they call it sacred geography, but do you touch anything about that, like centers of power, ley lines?
Not maybe exactly like you're describing, but we do have a representative picture of the heavens in that book. All the different planes of energy. There are really 7 planes of energy, vibration, with the earth plane being the lowest and God being the highest at 7.
Oh, the 7th heaven.
Yes. Isn't it funny, those little sayings?
I know. And you mentioned that in the book that there's a lot of, sayings that we heard here or there, family, friends. And then once you start getting into this path, it just starts making sense. Like, oh, that's why they say this. That's why they say that.
Yes. We should mention our 4th book is called The Trajectory of Becoming. That focuses a lot on meditation. And we have 70 some little meditations you can read daily or all at once, however you want to do it. They're just, very zen and make you think.
Yes, because a lot of people have problems with meditation.
They can't shut the mind off. And
it's like making your bed, brushing your teeth, working out. It's something that you do every day. So you just have to, you wouldn't not take a shower. You would do it. So meditation is necessary to be healthy, mind, body, and they work together. So that's the way you should think about it every day.
Yeah, but mind is like the machine that you turn on and you use it during the whole day. And then when it comes time to turn it off, you just can't find the key.
You do it. You need to do it in reverse. You need to meditate in the morning after you've slept.
Okay.
We're bombarded with electronic stuff now every day. We're doing this on the computer. So we need to shut off the mind if they're going to reach us. And it's really okay. I mean, I know this sounds different, but I actually meditate now just for the quiet because I can connect with Isabella in about 2 seconds.
Excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Man, I'll tell you that it's been an absolute pleasure. Remember, in your past lives, you have been potentially male, female, black, white. You've been rich, poor, kings and queens, paupers. You have lived all of these experiences. So if you don't have the experience you want in this life, you've already had it, because you have to learn to live on every side of all these issues. And again, make the decisions based on love, not conceit, selfishness, jealousy, and unforgiveness.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dave and Carla. Again,
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and sharing with us.
It was a pleasure.
It's been fantastic.
Now you know, guys, start your meditation practice. Let me know what you think about the episode. Thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you in the next episode.